Hello and welcome. I'm Raghav, and in this session of AccelQ, we are going to learn what is parameterization and how to do parameterization or data-driven testing in AccelQ. And this is going to be very easy and very interesting, and we will start from scratch and go up step by step, and we will learn what is parameterization, how to parameterize test data in actions in AccelQ. We will also see how to create and run test cases with different sets of values for the parameters we have created, and at the end we will see some useful tips and examples like how to create parameters for date field, like how to use current date or current date plus few days in the date field. So let's get started, and I will go to my AccelQ account, and this is the scenario we created in the earlier session to validate successful login on QBank. And if I go to the actions, here we had created two actions, log into QBank and log out from QBank. Let me go inside login to QBank, and here you can see the commands or statements where we enter username in the username field, we enter password in the password field, and then click on the sign in button. And here you can see we are using hard-coded values. So in general, we use parameterization to get rid of the hard-coded values in our test cases, and it also enables data-driven testing where we can use different sets of data and use the same test case to run this test case or test scenario with different sets of data. So let us see how to do that in AccelQ. So here, if you see, we have a params section or tab here. If I go inside this, as of now there are no parameters here. We have input parameters, output parameters, and local parameters. As of now we are going to focus on input parameters, and I will explain about output and local parameters later in a different session. So here I will go to this statement or command and click on this value or the test data, and here you can see we get this icon here. So I'm going to click here, and here I get options for literal, action parameter, and global property. Now literal is what we have been using until now, that is a hard-coded value, and we are going to go with action parameter. We also have global property. So this is like a placeholder where you can put some values that can be used throughout your project. We are going to discuss this later. We are going to focus on action parameter, and this is what is used for parameterization in AccelQ. So I will select action parameter, and here, because I do not have any action parameter already created, so I'm getting this option no items found, and I'm getting a option to create new action input. So I will click on new action input. I have to give some name, so I will say this is username, and the data source can be any text, data type, or data list. Now I will explain you about data type and data list separately in a different session. As of now we will go with any text. We can also make this required or not. Of course this is required, so I will keep this required as yes and say OK, or click on this tick icon, and here I am getting this information that parameter is added, and please review the following information. The action, so here it says the action is used in scenario. You will need to provide value for this new parameter in the scenario steps, or in test cases review the list below and confirm. So this is what we will do when we run our scenario. We will need to provide the value for the parameters we are creating now. So I'll just say OK here, and now you can see the parameter is used here, and under the parameter section we have this parameter, the input parameter added. I will do the same thing with password. I will click here on password value, click on this icon, say action parameter. Again here now it is showing me username which is already created, but I want to create a new action input for password. So I will say this is password. You can use any name here and any text, and this is again required, and say OK and say OK. And now we have these two parameters created. Now I can go to my scenario. So if I go to the navigator and go to the scenario and go to this scenario, here you can see we have test cases, and also we are getting this message test cases are not defined for the scenario. So I will go inside the test cases section, and here you can create a test case by clicking on this plus button. So I will click here plus, and now here you can see we can provide a name to this test case, and you can now see we are having these parameters and we can provide values here. So you can now see the advantage of adding parameters. Now I can run my scenario and I can actually create multiple test cases with multiple set of values for the parameters. For example, let us say this login can be done for different users with different privileges. They can be an admin user or a business user or a default user. So let us say I want to run this scenario and I want to have a test case where I want to check with admin user credentials. So I will say verify login with admin user credentials, and here I'm going to use the admin user credentials. Tags are optional. Tags help us to search for this particular test case in future, but I will keep this blank, and in the username I will give the admin user username and password. Now you can also see we have this encrypt tool here, and because if you have noticed in the action in the password we are using encrypted password, so you can actually encrypt the value here. I will click on this encrypt tool, provide my password and say encrypt and copy and use the value here. So this is one test case to verify login with admin user credentials. I can say add and exit, or if I want to add more test cases I can click on add. For now I will say add and exit, and you can see this test case is created. Now I will again create a new test case by clicking on this plus button, and here I will say verify login with business user credentials. So here now I can give business user credentials for the same scenario. Now as of now I have a single set of credentials, so I'm just using that for demo, but in real world you can imagine that we can use different sets of value here. Again for password I am going to encrypt and use the encrypted value here, and I will say add and exit. So now we have got these two test cases for this scenario, and I can now click on this run button. From here I can run, or I can also run from here. I will just click here, run, and here you can see we have got all the details here, and here we have got a link that is it will run two test cases. You can click here, and in case you want to check off or unselect any test case for execution you can do from here. As of now I will run both the test cases, and in case you want to edit the timeouts you can do it here. So this is page load timeout and element load timeout, and then say run. So if I go to the progress and see the progress here, so this is doing the setup as of now, and then it will run the scenario with two sets of data, or it will run two test cases with the values we have provided in the test cases. So let's just wait for the execution. So I will refresh and see the status, and you can see it says setup in progress. Now one more thing that you should take care in your actions and in your scenario is only parameterize the values that you really need, or in other words only parameterize the data that where you want to have different sets of data for different test cases. Do not just go and parameterize each and every possible value or test data. That will make your action and the entire test case complex. So use this parameterization only when you require. So let me go back to the result, and it is still running, so I will come back and see this. Let us see an example where we can use parameterization for a date field. So okay, so you can see now it is running, and the first test case is completed, which is verify login with admin user credentials, and now it is running the second test case, which is verify login with business user credentials. And if I go and check the images, So of course here we have used the same credentials, so it will be same for both. So you can see it is entering the username John Todd and then the password, and it will then log in. So this is working fine. Now let us see an example. If I go to some website where we have to enter some dates, for example, I go to travelocity.com. This is a travel website. Now here, if you see, we have these date fields like start date, end date here. Now if I create a test case or I create action here where I put a current date as of now, and then here in the to field I put a date that is 10 days from now, a future date. If I hard code these values, it will work fine today, but tomorrow it will break because this date that I'm using today will become a past date tomorrow, and this will fail. So how we can handle this using parameterization? Let us see. Let me take a simple example. I have a Jquery Datepicker example here, a very simple example where I can add a start date and end date. I will also copy this link and make it available in the notes so that you can also do hands-on and try this out. So here I can select a date from here which is in DDMMYYY format, and then here as well. So I'll copy this and I will go to my AccelQ, and I hope you remember that we have to create a context first. So I will go to navigator and go to this plus button and say context, and I will say the name is Datepicker demo page, and I will say this is app entry point and give the URL here and say save and continue. And of course I need to open this on the same window where I have AccelQ, on the same browser window, so that I can record the view. And now in AccelQ I have got this record new view. I will click here, and here, because I have already opened it here in the same window, it is showing me this in the list. I will select this, and now you can see the AccelQ extension icon on Chrome is blinking here. I can select this and say start. Now make sure you do not move your cursor when the recording is in progress, and do not go to any other screen. So just wait for the recording to get completed, and now I will say done, and here it is recorded. It has recorded 36 elements. I will accept and I will say OK, and it will show me my view. So this is the recorded view. Now here I can add the elements. So this is start date. I will do a right click and say add to repository, and I will say save and say this is start date element. Similarly for the end date, I will do a right click, add to repository, save, and I will say this is end date element, and I will add. So I have got start date, end date elements added in the object repository or the elements repository. Now I will go and create actions. So I can go to the navigator and say click on action, or I can just go here and say action. Now I will say enter dates in date picker, and here the context where it belongs to is the date picker demo page, and destination context is the same, and I will say save and continue. And here in this context, this is the context. I need to correct this spelling, so I will go here. This is date picker demo page, and also you can see I am getting this information synchronization not defined for the context. So I can go down, click here to add synchronization, and I will say the synchronization is the start date element should exist, and I will say OK, and now this is fine. So let me go back to my action, and here I can start typing, like if I say enter and I'm getting all these suggestions. Or we have also learned earlier, I can go to the view and you can see the view is shown here, which is minimized at the bottom. I will click here, and here I have got the view. I can directly do a right click on the element. On the start date element, I will do a right click and say enter text in element, and here I can add some date. For example, I can say 25/11/2019 and hit enter. Similarly, in the end date, I will do a right click, enter text in element, and say, let us say 25/12/2019, hit enter, and that's all. Now this is fine for now. Let us say I have this current date and the future date here. This will work fine, but then tomorrow this will fail. So I need to have the current date, always the current date here, and some future date here. So here in AccelQ, it is very easy and very straightforward. I can start typing get current date, and you can see we have this option get current date. I will select this, and I can also select the format. So this is going to be DDMMYYYY. I will select this, and here now you can see we have the option to capture this into a parameter. So I will click on this capture, and I will say action output, or I can also select local parameter. Now local parameter is something that will only be available within this script, or the scope is only within this script, and that is fine for me in this case because I only need to use it here. So I can use this, or let me just go with the action output. I will say action output, and I will say new action output, and I will say this is current date, and say OK. And if you now go and see the params section, here you will see the new parameter here. So in the outputs we are getting the current date here. Now this is what I need to use here. So of course I should keep this up, and then in the start date, instead of using this hard-coded value, I will click here and say action parameter and say current date. Now this is fine. For the second input of the date, I need a future date. So here I can again say I will start typing add add to current date. We have this command here. Also you can click on this information icon, and you can see all the information and all the parameters and the return type for these commands or statements. So I will say add to current date, and I will say add get date, which is let us say 30 days from today, and the format is DDMMYYYY, and again I can capture it into a parameter. Again action output, and create a new action output, and here I can say this is current date plus 30, and save it. And you can see here now we have these two parameters and we are using it here. So of course now instead of this hard-coded value, here I will select action parameter current date plus 30. So now I can create a scenario. So I will click on this plus button, go to scenario, and say this is verify date picker demo, and save and continue. And here I will add the steps, and I will select the context date picker demo page, and here I will select enter dates in date picker action, save, and I can now run this to verify. So I'll click on the run button, and this is fine. And of course, again we have a single test case here. I will click on run and let us see the output. I will go here to check the progress, and this is doing the setup, and this is running now, and this is done. If I go and check the images to see the dates entered, and here you can see, if you see here, you can see the dates are entered. So we have the current date and the date after 30 days entered here. So this is how you can also use these options when you are dealing with parameters like dates, and this is how you can do parameterization in AccelQ. I hope this session was very useful for you. Thank you for watching.